You go out, knock a door, perhaps you're rejected, and so you dust your feet.
I've never heard of someone doing such a thing.
I have.
You have?
I have.
You've met someone who has dusted his feet?
When I was Folklore curator, anytime I got a pile of these on my desk and a student would walk by or a colleague, I'd pull them in my office and I'd ask, have you ever dusted your feet?
The basic idea is you dust your feet, and then, you can even read about this in the Gospels, that it won't be good for this town in the day of judgment. And so destructions might happen.
But I think we see some of these stories kind of begin to fade out because there is that acknowledgement that to desire someone's suffering because perhaps they're not ready to receive the gospel or they simply have rejected.
Stories come up around them because it's part of our early story. It's a part of our scriptural story, and we don't perform it in everyday life. And so, of course, we have stories about it. And it gets into this kind of the excitement of adventure and persecution.
Hi, welcome to Angels and Seer Stones. I'm Christine.
And I'm Chris.
Today we're talking about dusting of feet. For those of you who serve missions, I'm sure you've heard of this practice. You go out, knock a door, perhaps you're rejected, and so you dust your feet. If you've heard stories like this before, you know that it does not end good for those who have rejected the Lord's anointed. We're going to talk a little bit about that today.
We sure are. So I'm pretty excited about this topic. We've been wanting to do this. We love missionary lore, and you know that. But we've been wanting to do this idea of missionaries dusting off their feet against people who persecute or have prejudice against them for over a year.
A long time. We've been talking about it.
We even had an interview lined up with a guy who actually dusted his feet on the mission. I've never heard of someone doing such a thing, but
I have.
You have.
I have.
You've met someone who has dusted his feet?
When I was Folklore curator, anytime I got a pile of these on my desk and a student would walk by or a colleague, I'd pull them in my office and I'd ask, have you ever dusted your feet? Most of the time, it was a friend of a friend story or a legend, but on occasion, I would hear a story about the time they dusted their feet. In particular, I remember one of my colleagues, I won't give away his name, but I think he was quite embarrassed looking back on that experience that he dusted his feet at this particular town. Yeah.
I think it often comes with some embarrassment. Now, the basic idea is you dust your feet, and then, you can even read about this in the Gospels, that it won't be good for this town in the day of judgment. And so destructions might happen or so on. And it's usually done because you've persecuted the church, but it's also, you persecuted a missionary, but it's also just done if a missionary has given his witness to a particular individual or particular community. There was an idea in the early church that you would wash your feet or dust your feet. You actually have a note on the origin of this practice. So
this is kind of interesting, and it takes us away from dusting of feet to an earlier practice that a particular scholar sees as related. So I'm just going to read this.
This is Dan Belknap.
This is Dan Belknap, yeah. So it says, the ordinance of shaking and dusting of one's feet may have roots in ancient hospitality practices. And then, as you mentioned, David Belknap observes, hospitality has long been recognized as an important part of ancient Mediterranean culture. One of the central acts of that hospitality was washing of guests' feet. To wash someone's feet was to transform them from a stranger into a protected guest, someone under the care of a covenant of the household. We see this pattern throughout the Bible, with Abraham, heavenly visitors wash their feet in Genesis 18. Abraham's servants receive the same treatment when he arrives at Laban's house in Genesis 24. And in the New Testament, of course, the most prominent story is Jesus washing the feet of his own disciples at the Last Supper.
And him getting his feet washed,
right.
A great sign of hospitality, right? In John 12.
Yeah, it says, when Jesus sends out his apostles to preach, he tells them to go without purse or script, meaning that they're supposed to go and just lean on the hospitality of whoever they meet in that town that day. And if a town refused them, he instructs them to shake the dust from their feet as a testimony. And in that moment, their dusty feet become evidence that this place did not receive them, that they did not wash us, they did not treat us as guests, speaking of the apostles. And so that this ritual, the dusting of the feet, marks a failure of hospitality. And then during the restoration, this command takes on kind of new meaning. What had once symbolized the rejection of a traveler's bodily needs becomes a sign of something deeper, the rejection of the message itself. And so that's kind of fascinating. Yeah.
I like that a lot. We also know that in the early church, sometimes people would wash the feet of missionaries themselves to show honor to these inspired travelers.
Just really sweet.
Very sweet. So there's an interesting history of dusting or washing of feet in the church. There's not one formula of how you're to do it. Sometimes people are told to use clean water. Other times they wipe. Other times they just shake off their feet.
Yeah, this is what we call kind of a vernacular ritual or a folk ritual. We don't have a handbook telling us this is exactly how we perform it. We learn it from our mission companions, or we learn it from word of mouth, or fathers or mothers. Yeah.
So if you were going to perform the ceremony, somebody had really upset you, how would you perform it?
Oh, I don't know. This is the question that I was always interested in asking is, how do you do this particular practice? I think I would, just kick off the dirt off the bottom of my shoe. Mm-hmm. I don't know. Have you dusted your feet?
When I was a young convert, I would go on walks at night, and I would actually sit next to this little lake by our house. Mm-hmm. And I'd sometimes put my feet in there and think about washing my feet. But I don't know that it was like I was mad at anybody, or like I thought I had given a message that people didn't hear. I just thought, oh, this was this cool thing they did. And so I would sometimes do that and then pray out there.
Actually immersing your foot into
my foot in the water. And I think that's actually becomes the sort of most common way of doing it. At least I'll tell you about an experience where the apostles did it that way. Use a basin of water, and you put your feet in there, you dry your feet, and that serves the purpose. I think that's the most formal way. Did missionaries just kick their feet as a sign? When I was on my mission, I once taught a woman who was inactive, it's our inactive roles, and she was very upset at the church. She had joined the church because she married this guy, and he told her, well, he didn't tell her. She goes to the temple with him, and then she hates the temple. She told us that going to the temple made her feel like she needed to take a shower. Oh. She's really angry. I remember right then saying she'd become an evangelical, and I remember right then thinking, tell her about King Benjamin's sermon. And so I just sat down and talked to her about King Benjamin's sermon. And of course she said, well, yeah, that's good doctrine. That's true. Even I know that's true. And so we're leaving her house later, and out in front of her house are all of these, was it walnuts? It was some sort of round thing that fell off of her tree. And so she shouted out to us and said, boys, don't dust your feet right over there against me, because you might slip and fall. In retrospect, I obviously realized that she was just giving us a hard time, right?
Mocking you a little bit.
Mocking us. But I told her at the time, I said, oh, we don't actually dust our feet against, someone who doesn't agree with us. That doesn't make a lot of sense. And she looked at us and said, oh, okay. And went back inside.
Well, that's a pretty funny experience.
Right. So she imagined it was literally a dusting of your feet on the ground, like kicking off your dirt when you come to someone's house.
I guess I kind of think of it like that. Yeah. You're just kind of cleaning your shoe there, dusting off your feet. Yeah. I think of Pilate, who washes his hands, right? And so that's kind of a more common practice that's understood more globally. And it just means I'm done. I kind of absolve myself from whatever happens here forward to this particular place or this particular people.
I think that's right. Early Latter-day Saints sometimes give it more of a meaning than that. For example, in 1845 or 1846, there was a high council on the Trek West They didn't know who was stealing their neighbor's goods. So what they decided to do was wash their feet against that individual doing it. And so in that case, it's like you're going to get your comeuppance. When I published Terrible Revolution, one of my reviewers criticized the way I discussed dusting of feet in the book and said it was as if I was describing a spell. Well, on the vernacular level, among early Latter-day Saints, sometimes it worked that way. In fact, sometimes it works that way in folklore.
Certainly, in contemporary folklore, there is the idea that I'm dusting my feet, and by doing so, God is going to seek vengeance upon these people, I think, in most legends. Yeah. You have kind of an earlier example, 19th century example. Should we do that first,
or should we play one of the stories and then work back to it?
Okay, yeah, let's do that.
Either way you want to do it. We had some wonderful stories dramatized by our production staff. This is Rowan and Brinley, and I think you're really going to enjoy them. I've enjoyed listening to them.
Okay, this first one comes actually from South Africa, or from a missionary who served there.
There is a town near Johannesburg, South Africa, named Jagersfontein. It was a prosperous diamond mining town. The townspeople were very unhospitable to the missionaries. They beat them up, threatened them with guns, and finally kicked them out of town. The missionaries complained to the mission president. He went to the town and dusted his feet off on it. Shortly thereafter, the town's mine dried up, and the town began to die. Now it's just a ghost town.
So this seems to be kind of one of the earliest consequences that we see take shape in these legends, is that, and in this case, it sounds like maybe this town deserves what was coming to them. Knives, guns, right? There's actual violence against these missionaries. But the town just kind of dries up and it becomes a ghost town. And a lot of these stories, or these earlier versions of these stories, the commerce kind of stops. People move out, houses become boarded up, businesses become vacant, and the town just kind of dies off. So that's, and we hear that again and again, but I think that's an interesting one, and maybe a more merciful one. I don't know.
We have a word for that, right? It's cursed, this town.
Yeah, there you go.
And this idea of desolation is used all the time in early Latter-day Saint conversation, that a place might be left desolate.
Yeah.
Even the idea that one day we're going to redeem Zion and go back and build up the waste places. All of those ideas of a desolate, a waste, a destroyed, it was civilization, and now it's becoming wilderness. It's really interesting.
Yeah, absolutely. Should we listen to another?
Let's do it.
Okay. This one actually comes from my home state, Florida.
In Florida, 2 missionaries tried really hard to teach a man but kept kicking them out. They tried again and again, but he bullied them and often threatened them. Finally, the man sent his dog after them, and a missionary was hurt jumping over a fence to escape the animal. The elders, frustrated, told their mission president. He gave them permission to dust their feet, which they did. The man lived in a duplex. The very next day, his half of the house had burned down completely. The man was killed in the blaze, and his dog was too.
God's very precise in this one. It's a duplex, obviously walls joined, but the fire comes and it only burns down his half of the duplex.
Isn't that interesting? Dogs are a bane of missionary work.
Oh, very relatable. Yeah.
Very relatable. And I can just imagine telling that story if you had an experience with a dog out tracting. Right?
Were you chased by any dogs in the mission field?
I was definitely chased by dogs almost every morning in my first area. And later, I had an experience when a door opened and a pit bull lunged and its owner grabbed at the last minute, said, "Not interested," and slammed the door. So I definitely have some memorable dog moments.
Yeah, me too. Absolutely.
Right?
There was this one dog. It was quite small, and the missionaries ended up giving him the name Satan because he had this raspy, aggressive bark. And he was small, but he was mighty. And if you came within 150 feet of the house, he would lose it. And this was a home of someone who had stopped attending church some time ago. And so there was the belief that perhaps the dog was out there keeping missionaries far off that porch. Probably not so.
I like it. I unfortunately did take matters in my own hands on one dog that would growl and bark at us. And this is abuse, guys, but I'm pretty sure the amount of time has passed where I couldn't be prosecuted for this. So I'll tell you, I picked up a water hose and I sprayed this poor dog until all of a sudden it became a nice little creature.
Oh,
it probably only took a good 30 seconds, but this dog used to bark and bark and bark at me. And then after that, I earned its respect. It was very sweet.
I don't know how I feel about that.
It's wrong. It's not okay. The other aspect of this one is that the missionaries sought their mission president's permission, which is what I hear constantly, that this is something that missionaries or individuals shouldn't take on themselves.
Yeah, no, this is kind of a reoccurring trope, is that the missionaries don't decide in and of themselves that this is the right thing to do. They actually go and say, look, President, these guys are persecuting us. And sometimes even the mission president will come down and actually perform it himself. So taking the responsibility, or I guess the feeling of responsibility off the shoulders of the missionaries themselves.
Yes.
Yeah.
That is true.
Okay. This one right here is quite dramatic. Well, let's just listen in.
Fielding said that he was told this story by a companion, and most missionaries in the Costa Rica mission also knew it. He believes without a doubt that the volcano did erupt and destroy the city because it's recorded in history, and he believes that it was done by the brushing of feet. He also told his mission companions this account as fact. Missionaries say that some 70 came to Costa Rica and dusted their feet off on the city of Cartago because the missionaries had been run out and were almost killed. And the volcano right there, I can't remember what it's called, blew up and covered the city with ashes and killed a whole bunch of people in the 1970s.
Wow.
That was awesome.
A volcano. Yeah, that's fantastic. Fire, I think, is the most reoccurrent, right?
Absolutely.
So a volcano, that's a step up.
Yeah, fire from the sky. Elijah's enemies in the Old Testament get burned up in a fire. So it's kind of a recurring idea. But yeah, even turning to a pillar of salt or burning all fire. And fire is, of course, a symbol of something that comes from above. And so what a powerful image. I like that it draws from actual history to say this event is attached to the persecution. And that shows up very frequently.
Well, they're confirming their belief, right?
Yeah.
Oh, I know this actually happened because a volcano actually did explode.
Absolutely.
Yeah. So I think that's kind of interesting. And in this case, a 70 comes out. So it's not even the mission president. This is top dog. And maybe that's why it's a volcano and not just a fire. And it doesn't take out just a duplex, but it takes out a city. I don't know.
Mm-hmm. That could be
Does it matter if it's a missionary that dusts his feet or if it's a 70 or an apostle? Is destruction greater if you are in a position of power? I don't know. It seems so in these stories. Give us your historical example.
So in the 1830s, Joseph has the revelation, we're supposed to do missionary work just like it was done in the New Testament. And so we do washing of feet. We go without person script. We depend on the kindness of strangers. And so people began doing this. And one of the most poignant and kind of disturbing accounts is Orson Hyde washing his feet against his own sister and doing it in front of her. And he's crying and she's crying. And he almost uses this as like a sign of disowning his family. And at least that's how it feels to me, even though he's hurt by this. I think the early saints quickly realized that this could be a weaponized practice, that it's something where you could perform it and it would make the other person realize that you're doing something against them.
Yeah.
And so it does read like a curse, like, I'm going to curse you, son. We get a revelation in the Doctrine and Covenants that actually specifies that washing of feet or dusting of feet needs to be done in private, that it's not go alone. Don't do it in front of the person that's offended you or has offended God, lest you offend them, but do this by yourself. And I think it is a folk practice. I think it's always a folk practice, at least an unrecorded. We don't have the instructions of how to do a practice, but we get some specific rules, and this is probably the most important one.
Well, I think that example is kind of heartbreaking. So it's family. It's almost the severing of this relationship. Like, I've tried to save you, I guess, and you've rejected my invitation, and therefore, I mean, that's heartbreaking.
It is heartbreaking.
Yeah.
Already this nature between Latter-day Saint converts and their family is strained. And here it is, instead of the concern being the family
right,
leaving you, you're kind of symbolically leaving the family. And I don't like to read things like that. It's hard.
And I can see Joseph especially not loving this, because I think that all throughout his ministry, he's trying to figure out ways to build bridges between the family, right? His brother dies, hasn't been baptized. Well, how do we build a bridge between me and him and God and him? And he's always seeking revelation, not to sever families, but to maintain them, right?
Absolutely.
To assure them. So
and of course, a lot of converts come from family members. Back then and now, the part member family, the extended family, so much so that early Latter-day Saints often talked about a shared blood of Israel that flowed through these families. And so, of course, you're going to go find Wilford Woodruff after Joseph's death goes to England, and he's largely going to do missionary work to his kin.
Yeah.
Because he knows they're Ephraim. They're the same blood as him, and so they should be believing. Orson Hyde, to go out and do this, did what he thought was right, but what a scarring event to have happen to both of them. I don't know how their relationship fared after that. I think it's interesting because sometimes missionaries say you have to, it's been so long since I used this terminology, but what do you call it when you end a relationship with an investigator?
Oh, I don't know. I served international. I served in Japan. So if there's a word for it, I probably wasn't familiar with it.
Stop teaching them, I mean, is what it is.
Yeah.
But, this can be a really harsh thing.
Yeah.
If that person's dependent on that relationship with missionaries and you go over and you say, sorry, we can't meet with you anymore. And sometimes we hear stories of people who, because of that circumstance, actually embrace the gospel more wholeheartedly.
Okay, yeah. So the reason why I would never have heard this word is because in my mission president was one of these eternal investigators. Mm-hmm. And so he taught us to go out, and if there's an internal investigator who wants to go bowling with you or eat lunch, you go eat lunch, you go bowling, you do not give up on these people. Ironically, his story is that eventually, it was his husband and wife, so both of our mission presidents, who the missionaries finally felt, okay, enough is enough, went back to the couple and said, look, we're going to stop teaching you if you don't get baptized. And that's what we feel like we have to do. And that pricked their heart, and they said, okay, we're ready to get baptized, and it changed their entire lives. But before that, they had met with numerous missionaries, and so for us, it was, unless you receive revelation to the contrary, you just love those people, and I really appreciated that. So, yeah,
which is kind of our policy now about the washing of feet.
Yeah,
we don't do it.
Or the dusting of feet.
Dusting of feet or washing of feet is something that was once common, treated like it was a commandment to do it as part of your missionary work, and today it's unheard of.
Wait, do you think that there is a time that it is appropriate to dust your feet?
Oh, yeah.
Yeah, okay.
I assume if you're really persecuted, I don't know that you actually need permission, but I think you see that in lots of stories, and I'm sure someone has said, don't do this to their missionaries. But I assume that if you're actually persecuted, maybe you would dust your feet. Now, in this next story, I don't know if I would have dusted my feet then, but I might have.
You don't know if you would dust your... I don't know. This is one story, and all of you are going to know this one story. This legend you'll have heard.
I think we've dramatized it before, actually.
So there was this town in Ohio called Xenia, which is pretty much a Baptist town. And the missionaries had gone in there to try and preach to the people, but the people were extremely antagonistic. In fact, the missionaries at one point in time, a laundromat had their garments desecrated. They were dyed green and red and hung out in front of the store. Along with that, they had ministers that were after them and stuff like that. They even got their house pelted with bricks daily. So they said it was just something that was too intense for them to deal with. So they ended up telling their mission president about it, and he came down and he said, I feel strongly impressed that I should dust my feet off on this town. So that's exactly what he did. And then just about 2 or 3 months later, a very large tornado, we're talking something that was supposedly 1/8 of a mile wide, came through and destroyed half the town and killed something like 25 or 30 people.
Okay, there's a kernel narrative inside the legend here. There's a legend inside the legend, and maybe you caught it. It was a story about a laundromat that desecrates garments. So hang on, we're going to listen to another story. We're going to listen to another story that's going to bring that narrative out a little bit more. But this one's fantastic. So not a volcano, not fire. We've got a tornado this time.
And a mission president dusting his feet.
Yeah. No, this one's fantastic. This story about the laundromat, though, I wanted to go back to the comment you made about there being kind of a history to the narrative, or folks trying to make history fit with the belief. When we're talking about this laundromat story, I have probably 50, 60, 70 versions of this story, and they happen everywhere, which isn't unlike your typical missionary legend, but these stories are told with such confidence that they are in fact true. The provenance becomes very clear. It's not my cousin's sister's brother. It's like, no, this is where I served, and this is the city I served in, and my mission president told me this happened. Or there's just a sense that this is in fact history. This happened. I don't think it did, but
because it was such a popular legend cycle for a time, and so it's very easy if everybody's heard it happened here. It begins to be treated like fact that it happened here, and as that mission story that didn't actually happen there spreads to the next spot, 10 years pass and it really happens there.
You know, I'd love to have a better understanding of why the laundromat, you know, if we're able to trace a story to a period of time, you know, stories about serial killers attacking system, you know, whatever. And there's Ted Bundy. And so, that makes sense for that particular narrative to kind of develop at that time. This story seems to come around late 80s, 90s. But what's happening at that time? Or maybe it's more in the 80s, but what's happening at the time that it's the laundromat?
What do you think?
I don't know.
Well, there's a lot of attention on Latter-day Saint temple rites with the making of the movie Godmakers.
Okay.
And so could that be the question that we feel sort of violated? How would people learn about the temple from us? Well, my garments put into this washing machine keeps them vulnerable, and they can actually expose this side of myself that's sacred and that I'm not supposed to share. You know, that idea of making sure you don't expose the garment is also something that's important to young missionaries, because we're told, at least I was at the MTC, like, make sure not to hang out in your G's, your garments, while you're around the house, and make sure to never take a photo just in your garments. And I remember thinking, make sure those marks never show up when you show them, right?
I do think missionaries have a special fascination with garments because they've just gone through the temple. They haven't had a lot of time to process that ritual by the time they're in the mission field. So they've just changed a significant part of their everyday. They're putting on this garment where they never have done this before. And so they're trying to assign meaning to it. They're thinking about it, maybe in a way that you don't, again, for the rest of your life. And you're doing it because with other missionaries who have just for the first time done the same thing. And so that's a much more thoughtful, are we okay?
Yeah, we're good.
That's a much more thoughtful pondering. I was thinking maybe at this period, missionaries were moving out of homes. For a while, missionaries lived in homes and basements, attics of other members, and there was a washing machine in house. And so maybe this is as we see kind of a shift of missionaries moving into their own apartments. I don't know, but that was kind of
an angle of research we could do on it. That's fascinating. Yeah.
Okay, well, let's listen to an actual laundromat story that brings out that narrative a little bit more.
I did hear of a story where some dry cleaning people went in and took these elders' garments. They took the elders' garments and hung them in the windows. And they went in and asked them to take them down, and they wouldn't do it.
No.
The elders even offered to pay for them.
No.
And they wouldn't do it.
No.
So they told their mission president, and their mission president went over there and tried to do something with it. And what happened is he just raised his arm to the square, an action signifying the authority of the priesthood, and dusted his feet. And not much longer after that, the thing burned to the ground.
Love it. That has the elements, right? The other one had the dyeing, different colors.
Yeah.
This one has the exposure of it in the window, right?
Yeah.
And sometimes they even have a sign up that says something about it.
More magic underwear.
Mormon
monkey suit. Yeah. Yeah. It like you said, it feels very exposing, right? You walk back into your surprise. There is your sacred
underwear.
Yeah, on display for everyone. It's a fun story. If anybody has any thoughts about why this particular narrative began to develop at the time that it did, we'd be interested in hearing what you have to say.
If you yourself have done it, we'd like to hear. And if you did it in this era, we'd love to track it down too. Have you heard this story? Did you hear it as a missionary? What decade did you serve?
Chris, what's that word, that German word for when we desire after someone's suffering?
Schadenfreude.
Yeah, talk to us a little bit about that.
So this is, I study the apocalypse, and this is one of the questions that's ongoing in Latter-day Saint culture. One, people are mistreating us. There really is persecution. Two, we know these terrible judgments are going to happen before Zion can be established. When we tell these stories, are we actually hoping evil is going to occur to people, that they're going to be hurt? Am I taking pleasure in your suffering? Early saints were really worried about this. And so there are stories about suffering, but they always have this element in them of sorrow of the visionary or the prophet who's talking about them. So Joseph, according to Jedediah Grant, has this vision of the judgments that are going to happen in the United States. Pre-Civil War, we're expecting things to happen though. And he says it gets so crazy, so disturbing that Joseph has to close the vision. In section 109, when Joseph Smith dedicates the Kirtland Temple, and we have that prayer there, he says, what's the exact word? But he said, Lord, let us accept thy will. We know it's not pleasing. Let us accept thy... Let's pull the actual verse up here. Here it says... I'm going to read this whole little section here. Put upon thy servants, the missionaries, the testimony of the covenant, that when they go out and proclaim thy word, they may seal up the law, washing of feet, and prepare the hearts of thy saints for all those judgments thou art about to send in thy wrath upon the inhabitants of the earth, because of their transgressions, that thy people may not faint in the day of trouble. In whatsoever city thy servants shall enter, and the people of that city receive their testimony, let thy peace and thy salvation be upon that city, that they may gather out of that city the righteous, that they may come forth to Zion or to her stakes, the place of thine appointment, with songs of everlasting joy. Until this be accomplished, let not thy judgments fall upon that city. In whatsoever city thy servants shall enter, and the people of that city receive not the testimony of thy servants, and thy servants warn them to save themselves from this untoward generation, let it be upon that city according to that which thou hast spoken by the mouth of thy prophets. But deliver thou, O Jehovah, we beseech thee, thy servants from their hands, and cleanse them from their blood. O Lord, we delight not in the destruction of our fellow men. Their souls are precious before thee. But thy word must be fulfilled. Help thy servants to say, with thy grace assisting them, thy will be done, O Lord, and not ours. A really powerful section of that prayer, which is all about dusting of feet, even though it doesn't say it, has the same parallel language that Christ gave when he actually explained this rule before. It's talked about sealing up the law. But then it warns us, even though it's expressed as a prayer to God, it warns us, like, we're not supposed to be happy about this. I'm not supposed to be excited when my neighbor's house burns down. And that's what Schadenfreude is. It's the feeling of excitement when you're not doing that well. And that makes me feel good for some reason. Well, it better not if you're trying to follow the Holy Ghost.
I definitely prefer this version of, I think there's something to believing that God will take vengeance on your enemies. So in some of these stories, knives, guns, shooting, harassing the mission, trying to actually injure. I kind of understand that these stories have purpose in providing comfort, reassurance, like God is on my side. I'm going to be okay, though I be persecuted. Like God has my back. But I think we see some of these stories kind of begin to fade out because there is that acknowledgement that to desire someone's suffering because perhaps they're not ready to receive the gospel or they simply have rejected that invitation, that in and of itself feels just as dark as, as some of the persecution the missionaries are receiving. So this
you're becoming what you're preaching against.
Yeah, kind of this Old Testament God, New Testament Jesus, the merciful and the vengeful.
How we sometimes view it.
Yeah. It reminds me of the lyrics from is it "We Thank Thee, O God, for a Prophet." Yeah. Makes us all feel a little uncomfortable. What are the lyrics?
The wicked never such happiness shall
know, or something. Yeah, right. Of course, when we go out and serve a mission, our desire is to touch people's lives, to allow them to feel the presence of God, the love of Jesus Christ. It's to extend the atonement, mercy, and not judgment. Judgment, of course, is God's. And I think that kind of becomes blurred in some of these stories where judgment becomes that of the missionaries. If I do believe that there's a priesthood and there's power, and but I don't believe, I guess, in the dusting of feet as kind of a magic spell of sorts in which, independent of God's will, we have the power to demolish an entire city or wipe out an entire people.
And that's a great episode we'll have to do, which is about the early Latter-day Saint idea of cursing.
Yeah.
There were Latter-day Saints who believed people with the priesthood that got upset with them had cursed them and had followed them in their lives.
I think we'll leave it there then.
Not a real belief. not a thing. I mean, I suppose it could happen, but this was a nature of paranoia. And obviously, if you've been cursed, the way to be uncursed is repentance. Yeah. Thank you so much for joining us today. These sorts of practices are so interesting. Stories come up around them because it's part of our early story. It's a part of our scriptural story, and we don't perform it in everyday life. And so, of course, we have stories about it, and it gets into this kind of the excitement of adventure and persecution.
Yeah, no, like any other good story, they're told because people are working through, belief and real life experience, persecution, rejection, all that kind of stuff, and they're trying to make sense of it. And clearly, for a time, some of these stories really spoke to missionaries, yeah. So, anyways, we'd love to hear your stories, and we hope that you'll share them. Dusting of feet.
We'll see you next week.
See you next week.